Hello friends, my name is Dr Anuja Shukla. Welcome to the journey of PhD research. Today we are going to talk about what is a hypothesis. Hypothesis is very important in a research. So let us understand what is hypothesis. A hypothesis, in plural, just check the spelling, it is THESES, is a proposed explanation for a phenomenon. So whatever is happening around us, across us, in the nature, when we frame it in a form of a sentence, it is called as a hypothesis. Hypotheses basically are a tentative assumptions of a principle which is operating in nature. So let's say some person is showing some particular behavior, so that becomes the hypothesis if you frame it in a particular word. So let's say A leads to B, that means, or we can say evaporation leads to cloud formation. So that is a kind of hypothesis whenever we frame some sentence. Then we have to understand what is a research hypothesis. The research hypothesis is a very specific, clear and testable proposition or a predictive statement about the possible outcome of a scientific research study. So focus on each word. Research hypothesis is a specific, clear and testable. So your statement should be very clear. Do not use technical jargons. Use as simple as words possible. It should be very clear. Don't make it confusing. It should be testable. So please check this. Whenever we are talking about a hypothesis, most of the times we frame such hypotheses which cannot be tested. So for example, I make a hypothesis. If I walk from Earth to Moon, it will be 500 steps. So can we move from Earth to Moon? No. So that hypothesis is not testable. Always remember, whatever the statement we are making can be measured, can be tested in the real life, or it is a predictive statement about the possible outcome of a scientific research study. So we can also make some statement that maybe eating leads to weight gain, and we can collect some data and the result will tell us that whether this statement was true or not. So you can make a predictive statement and the results or the outcomes of that scientific research will explain that was that statement true or not. But can we make any statement based on our thought process? No. We have to make any statement based on the literature support, based on the particular property of a population, such as presumed differences between groups. So many times you will see some hypotheses like males behave differently in online shopping than female. So this is because there is a difference between how these two groups are behaving. Then you can also make it based on some particular variable, or you can also talk about the relationship between the variables. So there are different types of framing of hypothesis, and this will completely depend on what objective I want to achieve, what test I have to apply. So for t-test the hypothesis is different, for regression it is different, for population size it is different, for chi-square it is different. So you must know that what hypothesis you are framing. Is it fulfilling your objectives? Is it matching with the data, with the questionnaire, and is it matching with the test that we are going to apply? The next question that learners or the researchers asked is, why should I even make a hypothesis? So whenever you are doing a qualitative study, it's not very much expected, but whenever you are doing an empirical or a quantitative study, that means you are collecting primary data or secondary data, it is expected from you to start with a hypothesis. There are some fields of research where hypothesis is not very important, like if you are going ahead with econometrics, or some particular kind of study like you are going with ethnography. So it's not mandatory, but it is always good to have a hypothesis, because let's say I wanted to test the impact of tulsi on COVID effects. So I just started with a hypothesis that drinking tulsi water daily will reduce the COVID symptoms. So then I can approve or disapprove after the collection of data. But if I don't begin with a hypothesis, it will not be possible for me to conclude some good research. Okay. So it is very important if you are making correct business decisions. So if you are talking about management decisions, you must have a hypothesis for some particular business decisions. So like if I want to check the impact of advertising on sales, and I say advertising is positively correlated to sales, or advertises increases the sales, then I can just check it and approve or disapprove, right? Based on that, I can make correct decisions to pursue my research. So if you want to do a research, you want to do a PhD, you want to write a research paper, you have to make a hypothesis to find a solution to a problem. So let's say you want to study the impact of a fertilizer on different kinds of crops. So you need to have some hypothesis that a fertilizer increases the food crop quality or production, something like that. Without that, we cannot go ahead. So like hypothesis is like a stone based on which we can construct our house of research. To find a relationship between the two variables, and if you want to draw some inferences about a particular population, so like if you want to match that whether how my customers are they behaving similar to the customers of some other particular area, you want to compare two populations, then you can make a hypothesis. You want to understand the consumer behavior, then you should make a hypothesis. So hypothesis testing is a form of inferential statistics that allows us to draw conclusions about an entire population based on the representative sample. So remember, there are two kinds of statistics: descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So descriptive statistics just describes the population, whereas inferential statistics helps us in drawing the conclusion for the entire population based on the study of a smaller sample. So since we as a researcher cannot study the entire population, which may be lakhs or crores, we choose a small sample. Based on the study of the sample, we can make an inference or an understanding of how the population is going to behave, right? So that's why it's very important. It can help us draw conclusion for the population based on a representative sample. What are the characteristics of hypothesis? Number one, hypothesis should be clear and precise. You should not have jargons. You should not have technical terminologies. Hypothesis should not be very complex. Have very easy, simple hypothesis like eating leads to weight gain, or there is a positive relationship between electronic word of mouth and the sales. You should have very simple, clear, measurable hypothesis. Hypothesis should be capable of being tested. This is again very important. So if I make a hypothesis, if I dance in the rain, my height will go up. So like how will I match that? How will I compare that? Can I have some variable for that? So always remember, if you make some kind of hypothesis, so I can make an hypothesis like impact of e-governance on the production. So can we measure that? And if yes, then how do we plan to measure that? How will we measure e-governance? E-governance is a, you can say, type of system. So you have to define what you are going to measure, like how many policies are there or which policy impact you are going to check. And if I'm saying based on the, I'm testing the impact of e-governance on the success. So what is success? Success of MSMEs. So success is a very you can say abstract word. So you need to define how you are going to measure that success. Will you measure it by the number of years it has succeeded? Will you measure it by how much profit it is making? Will you measure by number of employees it is employing? So again, whenever you are making some kind of hypothesis, to make very precise, clear, and it should be capable of being tested. So it's not like an abstract art, right? So hypothesis should state relationship between variables if it happens to be a relational hypothesis. So if you are having two variables, and let's say if I want to study the impact of temperature and sales, and I say as the temperature goes up, the sales of ice cream increases. Makes sense. So that kind of thing could be tested. Hypothesis should be limited in scope and must be specific. This is very important. We should have a hypothesis which is short, sweet, have variables for whom I can collect the data, I can interpret the data. Don't make complex hypothesis for which we cannot even collect the data or we cannot test them. Researcher must remember that the narrower the hypothesis are generally more testable, and he or she should develop such hypothesis only. And again, since it is based on the literature review, therefore we have a lot of ideas from the past literature based on which we can frame the hypothesis. It should be consistent with the most known facts. This is very important. Don't make contradictory hypotheses at the first stage, right? We should always make such hypothesis which is consistent with the literature, right, with the known research which has been done. So if I say, as the temperature goes up, the sales of ice cream goes down, so it's like a reverse thing, then it will be very hard for you to justify why are you choosing something like this, right? So again, it's not exactly that you have to choose the opposite or the same as the past literature review, but it's good if you have a consistent hypothesis which is consistent with the known facts, right? So let's talk about types of hypothesis. There are different types of hypothesis. First is the research hypothesis. A research hypothesis is a statement of what the researcher believes will be the outcome of an experiment or an study, right? So if I'm doing a study and I just frame a hypothesis and I see that what is going to be the outcome or the experiment of my study, and based on future prediction, I made a statement today. So that is a research hypothesis. The second is a statistical hypothesis. So if I say it is like same as research hypothesis, but it is more measurable. So a research hypothesis will be eating leads to weight gain. So a statistical hypothesis will be like weight before eating and after eating is same, something like that, which is measurable. So in most of our research, PhD research especially, we make a statistical hypothesis. It's a formal hypothesis structure set up with a null and alternative hypothesis to scientifically test and research the hypothesis. This is the most general form used of hypothesis. The next is the substantive hypothesis. Substantive result is when the outcome of a statistical study produces the results that are important to the decision maker. So sometimes you are doing a study for some particular company, or if you are acting as a researcher in any market research agency, so you are doing some research only for that particular company, not for the benefit of the academicians, like you're doing some study on the production, on machine, on time taking to fit a tire, something like that. So if the outcome or the results are important to the decision maker only, so there we use this. So then let's talk about the part of the statistical hypothesis. There are two parts of the statistical hypothesis, a null and the alternative hypothesis. For every null hypothesis, there can be more than one alternative hypothesis. Okay, so null hypothesis can be only one, which says it states that the null condition exists, that there is nothing new happening in the world, the old theories are still true, and the old standard is correct, and the system is in control. That means null hypothesis believes that there is no relationship between the variables, nothing new is happening, whatever was there is good, I'm not going to do anything else, right? And the opposite is the alternative hypothesis, which will state that the new theory is true, there are new standards, the system is out of control, or something new is happening. So whenever we are going to test something new, we should make it as the alternate hypothesis. Then let's try to understand about one-tailed and two-tailed test. So in one-tailed also there are two parts, the left-tailed test and the right-tailed test. And two-tailed test is different. And how do we identify the one-tailed and the two-tailed test? Based on the alternative hypothesis. Once we have framed an alternative hypothesis, just check the sign of the alternative hypothesis. So if you have less than sign, this one, okay, so it's a left-tailed test. If your alternative hypothesis is having greater than sign, then it is a right-tailed test. If your alternate hypothesis is having a not equal to sign, then it is a two-tailed test. Okay, so who tells us the type of test? Our alternative hypothesis will tell us the type of the test. And how do we represent in the normal curve? Like this. So in a left-tailed test, the rejection region is in the left. In the right-tailed test, the rejection region is in the right. And a two-tailed test, there are two different rejection regions. Again, what does this mean? Stay tuned. We'll cover everything in this upcoming videos. So I've taken the data from multiple sources from the internet, and there's a disclaimer. The content has been taken from various sources for educational purpose, no intention to infringe the copyright. Next, we are going to cover about converting a business problem to a researcher's problem, because if we plan to do research, we need to understand how to convert a businessman's problem, a problem which a business person is facing in his day-to-day decision making, and how to convert it into a research problem and how to test that using the hypothesis. So that will be continued in the next video. By that time, like, share, subscribe, and please press the bell icon. Thank you.